Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dalaran, and Torghast has been getting quite a few updates in patch 9.1. But the Torghast that we started with back in the alpha and the beta is a Torghast many of us that got to play fondly remember. In this video, I wanted to talk about how I think Torghast could be more fun and less of Choreghast. Taking a look at the old version of Torghast, what made it super fun and super good, why everybody was super excited for it when it comes to, let's say, streamers, because the content generally was super enjoyable. Something new and innovative for Blizzard that could have been a pretty big game changer. Where did we take a wrong step, and what can we do to course correct right now if we want Torghast to be a fun experience rather than the currently known as Choreghast by quite a wide swath of people. I also found some old footage of Torghast, me doing a Warlock run, my first level 75, 72 run that you could do back in the alpha, to kind of help us reminisce the original OG Torghast and what at some point it used to be like. Torghast in the early alpha and the beta was a really cool concept, and it was very highly anticipated. Blizzard is generally known for 3 bits of content for the endgame, which is pretty known in World of Warcraft: the PvP section as well as the PvE, PvE being raiding as well as mythic pluses. All 3 are pillars of the endgame content, 3 legs through a tripod, but Torghast was going to be something new, something different. A roguelike experience for World of Warcraft, kind of similar to the Mage Tower challenges of Legion, but being able to tackle it by yourself or with friends, ascending floors, collecting powers, creating builds, and potentially getting something cool out of it. But how do we go from such a cool and interesting concept to what some people know as Choreghast, a chore that you do on a weekly basis, and there's absolutely no fun compared to the original version that had no reason for you to do it, but it was incredibly fun and super replayable. The early version of Torghast worked as such. It had 0 reward structure. There was no reason for you to do it. All we had are a bunch of different tests to test out different versions of Torghast, try different classes in Torghast, try various different powers in Torghast, but there was literally 0 reason to do it. Most people want some kind of a cosmetic or some sort of a reward, but in the early alpha and beta, we didn't really have any answer as to what this place will have for the longest. We just had this new content to test and have fun with, and that's all we needed. Another thing about Torghast that's different is the original alpha beta version of Torghast had a ton of floors to climb. Without any layers, you just have floors, up to 72 of them. The easy version of Torghast started you off at floor 1 all the way up to floor 18. The medium, I believe, started you off at floor 12 and for 18 floors afterwards, and hard difficulty started you off at floor 25 until you hit 72. The difficulty of Torghast was, when you're starting on floor 25, you don't have Torghast powers from the other 24 floors, 1 through 24. So enemies start off difficult. So at the beginning of Torghast, without having any powers, you are struggle bussing until you can pick up some powers. Those powers is what made your runs possible. Good set of powers and good builds allowed you to get to higher floors, and that was part of the fun. And you did struggle at the very beginning, but after you get a couple powers, after you get a couple good drops, with patience, you were able to gain the powers you needed in order to have that flawless, epic, amazing run, and that was honestly quite enjoyable. And once you really started ramping up with your powers, you were ramping all the way until infinity, until the final floor. And getting that perfect run was part of the fun. The current version of Torghast that we play now has a lot more of a defined reward structure. You gain some cosmetic rewards, maybe even mounts inside of Twisting Corridors, and you also gain Soul Ash, which is used to craft your legendary. The floors are set up a little bit differently. Instead of letting you go all the way to floor 72 from 25, which can be a really fun long-term experience, quite a journey if you want to say, instead you start at floor 1 and your run ends at the floor 6. So it's a lot shorter of a run, but it's broken up into different layers. Layers kind of choosing your own difficulty. Prior to this, Torghast just had 1 difficulty, and you either started on the easy one on lower floors, or you went to hard, skipping quite a few floors ahead of time. It's also worth noting, since you only have 6 floors worth of powers to collect, you get a much smaller pool of powers, so you can go for some crazy, wacky, awesome, hilarious builds. You can sort of do that in Twisting Corridors, but the reward structure there is pretty bad. I mean, there's gaps in between layers of what it can drop for you, so most players end up not hanging out in Twisting Corridors too much. I made videos of me running classes to see what kind of builds I can make in Twisting Corridors, and that has been enjoyable to some extent, but the replayability is far lower than that of the original Torghast. Going forward in patch 9.1, Torghast is going to be slightly different compared to the current version, but it looks like it's moving even further away from the original design. The actual reward structure is very similar to the current Torghast, where you still will be able to craft your legendaries with the new 9.1 Torghast runs, but the reward structure for cosmetics, pets, and other consumables like actual end-game rewards is a lot better in the new Torghast. You can get sockets and conduits to draw from flawless runs, which is another thing they're doing in order to kind of design it a little bit differently. But in terms of reward structure, it is taking a step forward in terms of adding more stuff to it. You'll have 5 floors for your basic runs, with opportunity for bonus floors if you go for a flawless 5-star run. But it does mean for most of you, it's just 1 floor shorter Torghast, but that also means less powers to collect that way. Instead of collecting powers, it looks like Blizzard is going to focus a little bit differently on other aspects like torments. Torments are going to be very similar to Mythic Plus affixes. They give you buffs and debuffs inside of the Torghast runs that changes the experience slightly. Some enemies will be a little bit more challenging. Some elites will spawn orbs that'll spin around Diablo style, doing damage to you, so we'll have to avoid them. So it's extra hurdles for you to jump over and certain boons that will actually provide you buffs. So with a shorter run duration of Torghast, you'll get less powers, so less variety for different builds. But you will have hurdles to jump over in this version of Torghast with torments, which does add a different design concept and different experience for majority of players. First, I want to tackle the reward structure of Torghast, as it started with no reward structure at all. And over time, we've gotten what I would say 9.1 was looking like a better reward structure. The alpha and beta had 0 rewards. It was completely optional content. There was 0 reason for players to do it, but maybe because it was optional is why people actually want to give it a try. It was something new, it was something different, and because you weren't expected to do it, you kind of wanted to. And I feel like that's a normal human thing, where if there's something you have to do, you want to do it a lot less often. But if there's something that's optional, you can do if you want to. You might give it a try, see if it's any fun, see if it's up your alley. And I feel that the original Torghast was just so well done that it was just incredibly fun for many of players that never tried Torghast before and actually found something quite charming and interesting about this new piece of content. The current version of Torghast became a weekly activity, and that's really about it. So as all activities come, at least it's not some kind of a daily grind or a weekly grind or I guess perpetual grind, kind of like similar to the AP systems of Legion as well as Battle for Azeroth. So it's only like on a weekly rotation, but in a sense it is kind of mandatory. Technically, once you've gotten your best in slot legendary, if let's say you want to do Mythic Pluses on a character, raiding or PvP, once you get your best in slot legendary, you're kind of done. You don't actually need to go back to Torghast. However, with players wanting to experience different aspects of their character, PvP, PvE, raiding, where it's mostly single target, Mythic Plus, where it's a lot of AoE, that's a lot of legendaries for different types of content to craft. So it becomes a once a week type of grind that you just have to do. And because it's mandatory for you then, where you have to do it, then it becomes a little bit less fun. Then we have Prison Corridors, which tried to do something different with its rewards, but for 8 different layers, only 4 of them gave you any kind of rewards. So you had some dead layers where you have to complete it, but you know you're not getting anything at the end of it. And after about your 6th layer run, repetitive powers, same old enemies, same floors that you've seen before, and also not having every layer feel rewarding, just kind of created a bit of a monotony inside of the Twist and Corridor experience, where it could have been pretty fun, but ended up being not so much. The 9.1 version of Torghast deserves some credit. There's a lot more rewards to it. Yes, you are still gonna have, as far as we understand, your weekly Soul Ash grind. Although I heard that Soul Cinders can be gotten from other activities too, and you will need Soul Cinders, not Soul Ash, in order to be able to craft your Legos past I think it was rank 3, rank 4 that we could craft maximum. So if you want to get to rank 5 and rank 6, you won't need the old currency, you'll need the new currency, which can be, as far as I believe, acquired through different means. But still a weekly currency for you to collect. And while there is a lot more cosmetics for you to collect, toys for you to collect, even endgame things for you to collect a little bit early, which does mean the structure for rewards is improved, I don't think it's the reward structure that makes it into a Torghast. I think there are other aspects we can consider to try to erase the Torghast label from Torghast. So what made Torghast fun? The original Torghast, the one that everybody was super excited for, and where did we go wrong? My thought process is what was fun about Torghast, the early version, with the different powers you can have and the different builds. That's what Torghast used to be all about. And we'll see that as a transition from the original Alpha Beta Torghast towards the 9.1 Torghast, seeing that we are actually straying away from the idea of having these builds and long runs and runs empowered by builds. One of a bit of feedback that Blizzard has gotten from Torghast is having to do a run all the way to floor 72 to get some kind of currency. Some players felt like that would be too much. So if Blizzard could shorten any of the runs, it would be better. So then we got those 6 floor runs instead. Doing 25 floors, 30 floors, 40 floors will let you collect lots of powers naturally. But a 6 floor run leaves you with some limitations. Going into 9.1, we actually go into a 5 floor runs instead of 6 floor runs, so even less powers for us to collect. So we traded out the long runs with a lot of floors that let you collect all these powers that you could mold your builds around. Instead, we have far more accessible floors, much shorter floors, but also less powers. Compared to the original alpha version of Torghast 2, we got a lot of variety in the builds that we have. And this is something I noticed pretty early on after doing some of the runs. In the early alpha and beta version, Blizzard lets you stack certain powers almost infinitely, literally infinitely. At the time, there wasn't a lot of powers for us to collect, and we had a lot of floors to get through, but that meant that you can stack mastery stats powers infinitely, stack certain common, uncommon, and even rare powers 10 times if you wanted to. So you could have a simple build where your whirlwind does 5% more damage times 50 stacks, and now all of a sudden you're some kind of a weird Fury Warrior whirlwind build, and it was kind of awesome. You could make literal builds around certain powers that you'd gotten often enough. Big mastery build, 100% crit build, 100% haste build, 100% versatility build. Builds where you could summon a demon dogs as a demonology warlock, and you had 100% chance to be able to get the cooldown refunded on it, so you could just keep summoning dogs over and over and over. Whirlwind builds for warriors like I mentioned, Mortal Strike builds for arms warriors, mages that stack their basic power that reduces the cast time of Frostbolt, Fireball, or your Arcane Blast, stack it up to 20, 30, 40 times to get instant cast version of those spells. It was really nuts, Wild West kind of stuff back in the early Torghast. It was super fun. And I really do think that those powers and the builds you can come up with them was mostly why Torghast was so fun, is because it was really wacky, really cheesy, but also really different. Shorten the amount of floors you have means that you get less powers, means you'll get less variety, so most people are just fishing for some of the strongest abilities you can get in order to be able to overcome any challenge that's out there. What Blizzard has done in patch 9.1 though is replace the powers and the amount that you can get with torments. Torments are going to be a little bit more prevalent. They're very similar to like a Mythic Plus affix, just inside of Torghast. Torments allow your characters to tackle on different hurdles. To have enemies that are elites have a chance of spawning orbs that will do damage in AoE, or enemies are immune to CC, or sometimes your characters are getting bombarded. Sometimes the end boss is going to have an extra minion to help him in battle that'll have separate mechanics to the boss themselves. Different ways for you to approach Torghast, with a lot of variety to it. So it's a different way to approach variety, randomness, but also different experience. Prior to this, in Torghast, you would get different experiences based on the powers you had and the builds you could run. Now, Torments replace that with the variety of different challenges for you to overcome, different buffs that you may be able to play with. And in a sense, that can kind of play into powers and the variety aspect of it that can be treated inside of Torghast in a sense. It's not quite perfect, but it's a step in a different direction, with a very similar feel of we want every run of Torghast to feel different, but in terms of how you go about it, it's just going in completely another direction. A different direction which I don't think is inherently a bad direction, as it does try to create more variety of the content, but it's not exactly the same Torghast that I grew to love. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say that 9.1 version of Torghast is worse. I think it's still better than the current version we have. Better reward structure, more goals, maybe more challenges from bosses, but as we get better gear, I feel like those challenges are not going to be nearly as massive. But there's a bit more of a competitive nature, like a Mythic Plus-esque taking of Torghast, which personally, as someone who does a lot of keys, I don't hate myself. But if you are to take a look at the bigger picture, I do think it strays pretty far from the original version of Torghast. It's way different and makes Torghast feel like completely a whole nother piece of content compared to what we used to have. And now for where to go next, and where I think Blizzard should really go with Torghast. Now, I don't know if any of these things are going to be feasible. This is going to be manpower, this is going to be resources to make this happen. But if I were to imagine a perfect scenario of how, let's say, I were to run Torghast, if I was the guy behind the content, for example. First of all, I would add multiple ways for people to get Soul Ash and let players play their version of Torghast. If you're someone who just likes to do your regular weekly floors of Torghast, you should be able to get Soul Ash that way. If you're someone who just spends a lot of time in the Maw and Korthia, I feel like that should allow those players that spend, let's say, 5 minutes inside of Korthia and the Maw, doing a couple dailies here and there, doing a couple activities, I feel like players should be able to earn Soul Ash through that as well. Choose what kind of content you want to. Want to do a Twist and Corridor run for whatever future reward Blizzard has in the future, you should be able to get your Soul Ash through that as well. Or if Blizzard adds, let's say, some other, maybe an infinite floor, very similar to the Alpha and Beta, which we'll talk about in a bit, whatever other forms of Torghast Blizzard adds, any kind of way to explore that kind of content should all contribute towards you being able to get your Soul Ash. So players get to choose the activity they really want to do and still being able to get their Soul Ash and Soul Cinders on a weekly basis. I think that we should still keep the normal 5 floor layers with bonuses. Like the bonuses where you get a flawless run, you get those 2 extra layers. Because the cosmetic rewards they added for them does give it a bit more replayability, especially when players have a different focus. Not on what kind of powers they can get, but if they can get a flawless run. You might as well unlock every single one of those floors. Let's say somebody makes a new player, new character, they want to get their best in slot legendary. If it comes, let's say, from a certain hallway of Torghast, what is the whole point of time getting that player from being able to run that specific layer in order to be able to get the legendary? Just let players be able to go into whatever hallway they want, let them practice whatever floor of Torghast they like. Of course, I would want for them to add more Twist and Corridor rewards. I'm even perfectly okay if they added recolors to it. I feel like every layer of Twist and Corridor should have a bit of difficulty, and if you are going to have a difficult layer, you should also have a reward structure with it. And I also do think they should add the infinite quote-unquote floors, similar to what we had in the alpha and the beta version. If players really want to run this quote-unquote infinite floors, let's say starting from the original floor 25 to 72, if a player does want to do an endless Torghast run, the higher they go, the more torments they collect. The more torments they collect, the harder the run is, but they're able to get all these powers until they literally hit a wall where the content is so hard that they cannot advance further. Give players Soul Ash depending on how far they went. Give players the opportunity to play that original endless quote-unquote Torghast that lets you have a bazillion different powers, that stacks infinitely, even the most basic power stacking forever and ever and ever, creating some crafty, interesting, overpowered builds for players to run with. It doesn't need to be balanced. Let players play very unbalanced playstyles just to see how far they can go. I mean, they had the original version of the alpha and the beta that kind of was the infinite version. All you would need to do is have it continuously go up in floors and get perpetually harder until players literally hit the floor. And of course, I would like to see a lot more powers inside of Torghast, a lot more ways for us to play our characters. Like I talked earlier in the original Torghast, where they let you stack very, very basic, common, uncommon, and rare powers infinitely if you were lucky enough to get them. Just unlock the potential and unlock the stackability of all those powers. Really throw the rulebook out for Torghast and don't try to balance it too much. Let it be an unbalanced, amazing mess that it honestly should have been from the get-go. If you add more ways for people to enjoy Torghast with the same reward structure, then you will give players the opportunity to play their version of Torghast they want to play. I feel like that would be the best way of going about it without, and I'm also considering like resource investment into this type of thing, because right now they already have a structure where they want for players to get their Soul Cinders from it. So you wouldn't be able to change that too much without having to do a real overtime in terms of how those systems work. But this way you could give players the way that they want to play Torghast. If you are going to keep it mandatory, at least let players enjoy it in the way that they feel like they want to. But that's going to be my final thoughts on what I think they need to do in order to make Torghast super fun. Less of a Torghast, more of a fun ghast, I guess. But thank you guys so much for watching the video. Let me know your thoughts about Torghast and everything that I talked to in this video. I really do miss the original Torghast. I think the changes that make it 491 Torghast are a little bit better. It is something that is definitely up my alley, but talking to some of my guildies did make me reminisce about the original Torghast and the fun that a lot of us did have way back in the day in the early alpha and the beta version of WoW. and it made me wonder if it's possible to bring back Torghast. What was that exactly, that charm that got so many people excited, and is there a way for Blizzard to bring that back from the grave? Thank you guys so much for watching. I do hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, what you think about my video, and as always, I'll see all of you guys in another one.